South Korea is often hailed as an economic miracle, having rapidly developed from the 1960s to become one of the world's largest and most advanced economies. It boasts globally competitive industries in shipbuilding, advanced manufacturing, finance, and automotive production, achieving all this with relatively low government debt, even while managing tense relations with its belligerent northern neighbor. Seen alongside the severe poverty of North Korea, South Korea's economic trajectory is frequently cited as a testament to the strengths of market capitalism and private enterprise. Yet when measured against other developed nations, South Korea faces significant challenges. Recent high-profile events, such as the declaration of martial law and an impeachment trial, hint at deeper structural issues. These events underscore a stark reality. South Korea's economic success has perhaps been less a miraculous outcome of great policy and more a precarious achievement shaped by unique historical and political conditions. Are the nation's underlying problems catching up with it? And how do its political dynamics reinforce these challenges? The turbulent beginnings. It might be tempting to think South Korea's modern story began in 1953, at the close of the Korean War, when the peninsula was split between communists in the north and capitalists in the south. However, the armistice that ended open hostilities never resulted in a formal peace treaty. Furthermore, for decades after the war, South Korea was anything but a stable democracy. From the end of the Korean War until the late 1980s, the South rotated through multiple governments, many of them authoritarian and marked by coups, questionable elections, and cults of personality. North Korea, with its richer endowment of natural resources and a direct land connection to China and the USSR, initially showed higher productivity. Had South Korean military dictatorships endured unchallenged, there's no telling how much the South would have diverged from the modern democracy we know today. Foreign assistance and liberalization. Despite the turbulent politics, South Korea received considerable help from the United States during the Cold War. Beyond capital injections, Washington offered military support and technological expertise, viewing South Korea as a strategic bulwark against communism. This was not a purely altruistic gesture. America gained a fortified outpost in a critical region. Still, the infusion of knowledge, funding, and U.S. troops, over 24,000 remain stationed there, greatly benefited the struggling South Korean economy. Those service members, alongside hefty payments to local contractors, indirectly boosted domestic consumption. Crucially, South Korea moved toward genuine economic liberalization and democratic reform in the late 1980s. This transition opened the country to wider global trade and investment. Around the same time, China also began to liberalize under Deng Xiaoping, but South Korea's reforms involved granting civil rights and holding fair elections, giving its population broader economic freedom sooner. The rise of the Chaebols. During the decades of authoritarian rule, certain private businesses gained special government privileges to rebuild heavy industry. These large family-controlled conglomerates, known as Chaebols, were effectively hand-picked to steer the nation's economy. Companies like Hyundai, Samsung, LG, Lotte, and Kumho received substantial state support, from financing to favorable regulations. They grew enormous and hugely influential, economically and politically. When South Korea fully opened to global markets in the late 1980s, the Chaebols aggressively expanded abroad. Their timing was perfect. Labor was still cheap compared to other developed economies, and China had not yet become the workshop of the world. South Korean exports, especially ships, automobiles, and electronics, suddenly became globally competitive. Another lucky break came via the 1985 Plaza Accord, which forced Japan's yen to appreciate, weakening Japan's export advantage just as South Korea stepped in to fill the gap. From miracle to monopolies, the Chaebol-driven model worked wonders for a developing country aiming to build a manufacturing foundation. But over time, these conglomerates developed outsized influence, blending the downsides of state-owned enterprises with the profit motives of private giants. One typical monopoly problem, price gouging, is partly mitigated by South Korea's export-heavy strategy. However, employment is a bigger worry. Because Chaebols pay so well, the race for jobs at these firms is fierce. Students endure grueling exams to enter top universities, then face stiff recruiting tests at Samsung, LG, or Hyundai. Consequently, many young people pour energy into landing these positions, rather than founding startups or small businesses. This hiring advantage also leads to another issue: corporate debt. Chaebols often run highly capital-intensive operations. Think shipbuilding or advanced electronics. Banks see these companies as too big to fail, so they receive easier access to loans, crowding out smaller enterprises. This dynamic fosters an economy heavily dependent on a handful of megafirms. Samsung alone has been reported to account for around 20% of the country's total revenue, though it's crucial to note that revenue is not the same as GDP. Foreign companies find it difficult to enter South Korea's market, given the government's historically protective stance toward its flagship firms. With new political upheavals and economic headwinds, many fear South Korea's older growth model is near its limits. Whether these tensions erupt into further instability or galvanize the reforms many believe are needed remains to be seen. Either way, the Chaebols, tight labor market, and shifting geopolitical realities will continue to shape the country's future.